golf was my life, and I didn't want to give it up. So I went to work.
And remember the name, for at just 9 years of age, Rory McIlroy from Hollywood is following in the steps of his golfing hero, Tiger Woods.
Oh my goodness! In your life have you seen anything like that?
And hello, golfers, or shall I say, golfers. Welcome to another episode of Making a Club Champion. I'm delighted for you to join me again on another episode of this show. I'm going to start this episode off with a quote, because it's relevant to the guest. Trusting your game is made easy when you know you have the right equipment in your hands. Precision Golf provides bespoke solutions, ensuring that whatever your ability, clubs can be built or adjusted to complement your game, allowing improvement without the handicap of ill-fitting equipment. Colin Montgomery, in 2010, a Ryder Cup captain. In this episode, we dive into Europe's leading club maker, who have made clubs for some of the leading tour pros to the weekend golfer. The club fitting industry can be a daunting experience and can be quite damaging to your game, and expensive. Without the actual knowledge, you can find yourself making these very expensive decisions because something felt right on the day. I, like many of you listeners, have probably bought a golf club because it felt good. Spent too much money on a set of irons, driver, expensive putter, and 6 months later it's back on eBay and you're cursing why you ever bought it in the first place. It doesn't have to be that painful, and golf clubs should last the set of time. Precision Golf was established in 2004 by James Davey and Simon Cooper with the aim of solving that problem and helping golfers identify and build their optimal set of golf clubs. Based in the heart of golfing country, Surrey, England, in a 4,000 square foot state-of-the-art facility, this quite literally is a candy store for golfers. Equipped with every possible gadget you can imagine to boost performance, including likes of TrackMan, Puring technology, over 100 interchangeable heads and shaft systems, ranging from brands such as TaylorMade, PXG, to some of the best Japanese clubs on the market with the likes of Miura. They do it all. We dive into what actually makes a good club fitting experience, the key principles to look out for when choosing your right clubs, and for your swing, optimal launch angles, spin rates, TrackMan data, and to the very best golf clubs ever designed in the history of golf. I hope you enjoy this episode with Simon Cooper at Precision Golf, and welcome to Making a Club Champion podcast, and thank you once again for listening. Simon, welcome to the show.
Morning, how are you?
Yes, very good. Thank you very much for being here. So I thought we'd jump straight into this and get a little bit more of a feel of what Precision Golf is, how it started. We can dig into sort of the team and your setup. But yeah, how did Precision Golf start? What's the story behind it?
So when I was playing full-time golf back in 2002, 2003, I actually met my business partner, James Davey, who's the club maker, where I actually went to get some clubs fitted myself. And through going back and forth and tinkering with my equipment and so working on getting the setup right, we became very good friends. And perhaps James saw that I wasn't going to earn money from playing before I did, but he sort of said he wanted to do it really properly. I mean, where he was training, they had a couple of options and had the sort of, you could see what the potential was for fitting, but he wanted to take it a stage further and spoke to me and said, do you want to do this moving forwards? And literally it was relatively, from my point of view, it was relatively, chance meeting, and these things sometimes kind of start from something really small. And literally we took it from there. So that was back in 2004 and 2005.
So James was he was a club fitter and you were sort of the player.
Yeah, I mean, he was doing his the club building training essentially with the company where I'd been to, and sort of learning his skills. He comes from a sort of design technology background, and wanted to get into the golf industry, having always loved the sport. And then I was coming at it from a player's point of view. I've been playing full-time amateur golf and some. At that point, just getting to doing some Europro, a little bit of Challenge Tour, a couple of events there. So it was really coming at it from the two different sides of it. I'd always been keen to understand what was going on with my game, whether it was nutrition or equipment or fitness, and so naturally the understanding the sort of nuts and bolts of the club sort of came to my brain quite a good way. So literally started from that point on.
So was there many people in the market of club fitting at that time, or did you?
It was really in its sort of embryonic stage. I mean, fitting really was, to a point. I guess something we'll probably come on to later on, but it's still perceived in parts to be sort of for better players, and certainly back then it was very much something where. You knew there were tour vans out on tour. You knew there were options out there, but it was really just starting to become recognised as something worthwhile doing, other than for the pros. So there really were very few at that point.
Because I guess you had your sort of like American Golf would have your standard club fitting, or like a local driving range.
Well, back then it really wasn't. There really was very little of it. I think there were, I'm trying to think back to that point. I mean, certainly, it's always you see what we've got out there now, and the amount of options, the amount of people doing various forms of fitting, and it seems mainstream now. But actually, 13, 14 years ago, there really was very little. There was the odd company, independent or otherwise. There was the odd sort of fitting centre from the big brands, but it was very, very limited. What the options were for everyone.
So. Did you have like a really good idea of the benchmark of sort of what precision golf was? Straight off the bat, you guys wanted to be the best in club fitting, or is it the experience, or what was the sort of what was the driving force behind it?
I think we knew what was possible from a build point of view, and from I think there were a couple of companies, one in particular in the US. That at that point James he'd been out to a sort of CTG conference, which was a sort of club technology group conference, and had made some really good contacts out in the States. And this was sort of this within the club building sort of fraternity. This was really being talked about as a way that we could really drive the industry forwards. So we were aware of what was potentially happening over there, made some good contacts, made some good I guess sort of brainstorming groups with the guys over there about what was doable, and that sort of really fueled where we are now. I mean, the kind of setup that's doable now that we have here with our own studio now is really, back then wasn't even, almost couldn't contemplate having so many options, but that was very much the driving force to where we wanted to get to.
Okay, and did you ever how did you fix on the, because precision golf is in a sort of warehouse unit? Did you look at sort of driving range spaces, or how did you go about figuring the location of? Yeah,
I mean, we certainly did. I think there's always been that bit of a debate of what's the best sort of environment for fitting. But I mean, at that point, obviously, cost was a pretty major part of it. To get a space at a driving range or to get involved at a golf club. Just cost-wise was going to be huge, and actually the most cost-efficient way of doing it was in an industrial unit. Sadly, our rental rates are rather more than in the US, but it's still by far the best sort of value space there is around. And actually, there are advantages of it over being out at a range, but certainly that was initially a driving force, and actually then we found that kind of environment worked really well. And over time, we did look at do we move to somewhere with an outdoor space or don't we? But actually, we chose to stay in that sort of internal environment.
Is it a better club fitting experience indoors or outdoors in terms of actual the fitting?
I mean, there's a strong debate within industry about it, but actually I think there are benefits of both. I think from a raw fitting point of view, it's we feel it's better to be indoors. I think from a consumer point of view, quite rightly, I think there's a fair argument to seeing ball flight. But actually, I think from an actual raw fitting standpoint, from what we're trying to achieve, the ball flight is actually the result of getting everything else right. So actually, in order to keep the process as, in essence, as controlled as possible, to keep it as pure as possible, actually indoors we feel is actually better, because ironically, we don't really want people to see the ball flight, because they're then you'll react to what you see. There is a generation animation of the ball flight with the simulator, the TrackMan software that we have, based on the data that's captured from each shot. But you don't react to it the same way as you would an actual ball flight. So as you're going through the process of testing, you're going to have options that don't necessarily work out, ones that do, ones that create one kind of response from the timing and the swing, and a completely different response from testing a different aspect of the club. So what you don't want is, you don't want the player to be affected by that process. You want just the most natural swing and natural movement that you can, because it's actually about matching the clubs to the player's movement rather than trying to get a ball flight out of it. The ball flight is the result of getting the other bits right.
Right, yeah, I guess if they start seeing a big sweeping draw, they could alter their swing.
Exactly that, yeah, exactly that. And that actually is the last thing we want. We want the swing to be as natural as possible.
Okay, there's a couple of points on this. So when I did work experience at St Andrews, this was when I was sort of 15, 16, and they just put in their latest TrackMan software, all of this, and whenever I was their sort of guinea pig for the week testing all their gear, which was great because I thought I was going to be sort of, behind the pro shop selling the Mars bars all day. And every club that I was testing, they wouldn't let me look at the brand, they wouldn't let me look at the make of it, they wouldn't let me look at the shaft, they just handed it to me and he said, just hit it. So they didn't want me to take sort of like almost a biased approach before every shot. Is that something you find? Golfers come in with, say, I only use brand X, or, because this is a Callaway, I'm going to hit it better. So is there like an approach you take it?
I think there are, you're inevitably going to have people who have preferences one way or another, and those who really don't care as long as it works. And I think neither's wrong. I think it does help to have some kind of, in some respects, to have some kind of idea on what a player likes or doesn't like for whatever reason. It can be as little as, I like the look of it, or I like the brand of it, or Dustin Johnson plays with it, I want to use what he's using. It's some kind of preference, it's some kind of orientation. I think with where the certainly club head technology is now, is there, particularly if you look at something like iron head technology, within each category of head, most brands have a head that will work. Now, there are some practical elements that might rule a couple of club heads out based on head weight or an inability to bend a head enough from a loft or lie point of view to get the correct measurements. But generally speaking, it's getting closer and closer and closer. So in actual fact, when you get down to the end decision of, right, what is the setup we're going to go with, you're normally looking at 2 or 3 options on the club head, particularly on an iron setup. And so if someone's got some form of preference, then it does actually help the decision-making process when you get to that very last part. With the woods, it's more clear on performance. So if you get someone who says, I really don't care, just fit me with what's working best, then you can normally, based on just raw data, you can show where one club head is slightly better than another. But it is getting quite marginal. So the personal preference side, if you can fit within that, then that's confidence, and that's only going to be good for their game.
Let's go back a bit in terms of the precision golf process. So someone comes in to see you. What do you do? What does the process look like as soon as they arrive in with you guys?
So as they come in, we'll obviously sort of welcome them, offer them a drink, try to get people to relax. It's generally you're coming because you want to get the best out of your game, and people can often get a little bit nervous or try too hard. And what we can try to do with this initial meeting and chat is to try and get someone to relax and chill out a little bit, so that we can get the sort of most natural game. The natural process itself, part of that initial conversation, we'll try and find out things about the player. Ironically, I might say an odd question, but are they naturally left or right-handed? That affects the swing side, no matter which way around you play. I mean, someone like Garcia's left-handed, Mickelson's right-handed, but that does affect the way the swing works based on being more of a top hand dominant side or bottom hand dominant side. Any other sports they played a lot of, again, affects the way they move, the way they swing. Any injuries, again, physically, how they move and what they're able to do. And then from that point, we're working through looking at their existing clubs. Really important to get a benchmark based on what they're already using. That can, again, affect the way they're swinging, kind of things that they're doing with their game. And you can often actually tell someone which clubs work a certain way, either work well or badly, or where their miss is based just purely on measuring the specs and the setup, the length and the loft and the lie and the balance, and looking at the components that they're currently using before they even hit a shot.
And you would test, but if it was like a full bag change, you would go through the entire bag and get measurements on TrackMan on that?
Well, we'd measure all the specifications of every single club. I think through a set of irons, it's not necessary to hit a 4 iron, a 5 iron, a 6 iron, a 7 iron, an 8 iron, because essentially the formulas on the way each club swings through the set and a set of irons is progressed in head weight and shaft weight to try and keep momentum and keep the way they're swinging as similarly as possible. So for the full swing irons, you don't need to test every single club on the bag. You test the wedges differently because the shots are slightly different. But you wouldn't need to hit every single iron, but we would then get someone to hit each of their woods. Again, as we're working through the set, we're looking at how their current ones are working, which bits are working, which bits aren't, identifying which bits can be improved upon. And that sort of benchmark of their existing ones gives us that effectively, we can give it an indication of how much it can be improved by. Then through testing with all the different head and shaft options, we can get to that end recommendation. Say, right, this is the before picture, this is the after picture. But most importantly, by understanding the equipment setup that they're currently playing with, we can explain why we're doing that, which again all just helps with the overall process and the player's understanding of what's going on, which I think is very important.
So, what are the most common sort of mistakes you see with people who come in before with their current set? Well, like, what are the most common? Is there like a theme of the shafts too weak, or
that side's changed a little bit over time. I think the industry, I guess, sort of message has been don't play something too low loft and too stiff, and that's we've definitely seen a change over the last sort of 12, 13 years. Of historically, particularly with the driver, would be putting more loft on and a lighter, softer shaft because players would play too low loft and too stiff, whereas now we're actually far more often than we used to, putting a lower loft and a stiffer shaft in, because the industry message has actually worked, and most consumers will now will pick up a regular track shaft just because they go, well, I don't play very often, I should play with a regular, it'll be easier. So that's definitely one thing that's changed over the years. I think, again, as the ball's changed, it's changed ball flights. So long irons, we're increasingly doing less and less long irons. So, someone trying to hit a 3 or a 4 iron, just not going to get the consistency they're used to. Partly the club heads are less loft, but the ball spins less, so it doesn't stay in the air. So those are probably the two main things. And then I guess the other bit's just getting the gaps right, getting the job rolls right, not having duplication in the bag. Quite a lot of players have clubs they hit, 2 or 3 clubs, certainly a couple of clubs they hit the same distance. So that's probably the biggest thing that we see.
Okay, so you're just trying to reduce those gaps as much as possible in terms of those 2 data points.
Yeah, you're trying to make sure that each club in the bag has does a fair role for that player. It does the right kind of job. So again, understanding where someone plays most of their golf, you might for someone who plays down the links, put a driving iron in rather than a 5 wood, based on getting a lower ball flight. Whereas someone playing some of the courses up here, if you take something like the West Course or Wentworth, it's got to be through the air yardage is important. So you're likely to put the fairway wood in, the lofted fairway wood, to get the flight up versus a long iron or a driving iron. So that kind of thing, making sure we're putting the right kind of club in someone's bag.
Yeah, because I guess I myself included, if I come for a fitting, sometimes I don't know if we know what we're going in there to get it is it the quick fix? Is it I'm not sure we know the specific data on what would determine this being a successful club fitting, because it could come back to feel. This is how I swang this club on the day. So no, it's interesting to really get a grasp on what determines a good club fitting, and if that's building a set that's suitable to your game.
I think ultimately it's you mentioned about something a long term. It's got to be a long. Well, it doesn't have to be. I guess if someone just wants a quick fix, then you can do that. But ultimately, it's got to be. We would always look at it as a long term thing. If there's something you mentioned about sort of how someone swings on the day, probably one of the questions we hear most often is, what happens if I'm not hitting it well on the day? But actually, the timing and the strike might be a little sketchy one day, but actually the base way that you swing, the muscle groups you use, the movement patterns that you use will be incredibly similar. And we often see literally a couple of degree variation on swing path from you get a sort of an 18-20 handicap, would think there'd be far more variable than that. But actually, the variations when you look at the data on the swing is very, very small. It's just that the timing goes on and off. So actually, the way someone swings varies very little, but just the quality of strikes, you move from a scratch player through a sort of Cat 1, Cat 2, Cat 3, Cat 4, up to sort of 18-20 handicap or higher. All that happens is just the regularity that someone's able to deliver that club head consistently in sync with their body to the back of the ball. That's the only difference.
I was going to ask you what's the biggest difference between, say, a scratch handicapper and a 15 handicapper in terms of a TrackMan data or.
Ultimately, it's just consistency. I think it was Jack Nicklaus who said, it's not the biggest difference between the top players in the world, the ones winning majors to I could grant it's a tour pro analogy, but it's just how good your bad shots are. And that really is yes, from a technique point of view, you're likely to get a tighter technique from a lower handicap player. But actually, if someone's got the base actions are repeating, it's just how consistently they're delivering the right bit of the club face to the back of the ball. How consistent is their body swing synchronization? That's basically the main difference. So where you're looking to match the clubs to the way someone moves to allow them to deliver the head in sync with their action.
Yes. Say if is there a point of no return? Say if there's I remember my first club fitting. It was something like a TaylorMade R7 driver, but I was so over the top of my swing. It didn't matter how much weight he put on the right side of the club. That ball was always going left or right. Is there a point of actually I should start working on my swing before the club, or before a fitting session, or is there a bit of ground in between?
There's definitely ground in between. I think there are. From a fitting point of view, the worst thing you can do is sort of say to someone you can fix something with the clubs when you clearly can't. Ultimately, the swing will override anything within reason you do with the clubs. Obviously, you can change loft and then not flight up and down, but actually from a shot shape point of view, what you're doing with that swing line is going to override anything that we can do with the clubs. So if you're looking at it from a long-term point of view, and if you're being true to your client, then you have to offer them the option of saying, are you willing to work on your swing, or is this what you've got? Am I fitting what I've got? Or if we identify something that will make you a better player, but by going away and working on it and then coming back to us to reassess, if you're prepared to do that, then we have to let someone know. So as you say, if you're getting 10 degrees out to in with a 12-degree open club face to the swing line, there isn't a club in the world that isn't going to slice. So I think you have to let people know that that's the case, and if they aren't going to work on it, they've got to be honest with you and say, no, this is me. Or if they are and can work on it, then what we can do during the session is demonstrate how much difference it'll make, and then say, right, if you're going to work on it, then actually it's worth going and working on it, and then come back and we'll reassess it.
So I guess the main goal of it is sort of building a club that is repeatable for the body movements and the strike, which you, the individual as a golfer, has. Mm. So it's sort of where when someone does get a club fitting, that may be a good metric to sort of go by. Is that right?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think with it's getting throughout the golfer's progression, I mean, it's you will look at it differently depending on the player that walks in the door. So you might orient the way for example, for a junior who's getting taller and bigger and stronger, you have to push them a little bit. You have to make it a bit harder work initially, so that they're not growing out of it in 5 months' time. And equally speaking, if you get someone who's in the sort of latter years, you want to put it on the easier end to make sure that the clubs last as well. But equally speaking, you're literally the main spec is get the clubs working as well as possible for that player. If they are going to go through a lot of swing change, then you have to make allowances for it. But actually, most of the time, it's only really an issue, that side of things, when you get to the top end of the bag where the loft is that low that it can have a major effect on the flight. And if a release pattern changes hugely, then it's going to change the flight profile. And so with irons, you can adjust loft and lie, or it might make it a 7-iron instead of a 6-iron someone's hitting. But with the driver, if you get the loft wrong, it's a very, very costly mistake. So that would be the one bit of the bag that you might well say, okay, if you're working on something, then let's just put this on hold for the moment and then come back to it. Or use a head that's got enough adjustability to allow for it.
So the golfer's now, he's now worked his way through his old clubs. You've got the angles, you got the data on it. What's next in terms of the process?
So once we've got the data with their existing clubs, then we will identify why they're doing what they're doing, and then that part allows us to say, right, your clubs are producing X,
Is that in
Y,
terms of like a miss or like too much spin, or?
Yeah, whether there's potential for more ball speed, whether the launch angle's too high or low, whether the miss is left or right.
So it could be a number of things.
Yeah, it allows us to identify why that miss is that way. And then from that point, you've got to get to that why. What is the root cause of it? Why are they getting that result before you actually even attempt to try and make a change? So once you understand that, you can say, right, if the result is missing it to the left, is it because the club is too light? Is it because it could be say any number of reasons, but why are they swinging it that way? Why is that result happening? And then from there, you can start to make adjustments down a much more channeled, reasoned route, rather than just effectively sort of, pick something and try this.
So like a one fits all. It's actually the precise element behind that.
Very much so. Yeah, very much so. I mean, the forces involved in the golf swing. If you take, you're moving a club from the top of the backswing at 0 miles an hour, and at impact, 6-iron is anything from 60 miles an hour to 100 miles an hour. At the top and the bottom end of the scale, there's a huge amount of momentum and a huge amount of energy shift, and actually those forces affect our bodies in a massive way through the swing. So getting the balance and the weighting and the way the club's swinging right really make a huge difference. So knowing why you're making a particular change is really, really key to helping the golfer achieve what they want to achieve for the long term, rather than just this works on the day because someone happens to hit it well, rather than actually why does it work well.
And then you'll just start implementing maybe some new clubs to try and.
Yeah, we test with. We've got setups where with all the woods that have interchangeable or adjustable hosels, we've got a set of shafts with a universal tip on, where we can interchange any of the 160 odd driver shafts that we have into any of the heads. So you can, and similarly with the irons, we've got another interchangeable setup where we've got examples of each of the heads that are on the market that we can put all of our test shafts into. So you can isolate each component and therefore see which bit's working, and again understand why, rather than testing different heads and different shafts combinations. How
was that done before that technology?
Well, beforehand it literally was a case of I was trying to think how many, but we had an awful lot of on irons glued
just stock irons.
demo product. Yeah. because there'd been interchangeable setups in the past, but the shaft didn't go all the way into the head. So the tip of the shaft would stop at the top of the hosel. And the problem is that affected the way the shaft reacted and worked quite a lot. So once there's a system in place where you could literally insert the shaft all the way to the bottom of the hosel bed, which is where the neck joins the head, you're then getting a representative result out of it. So then it became worth doing. But before, it was literally you had a load of 6 irons built up with different shafts, different lengths, and heads that you could adjust. And you had to hit a different head, different shaft combination each time.
I can imagine your pro shop just feel like some sort of toy factory of 6 irons.
There were quite a lot.
Golfers just hitting balls into the net, and they've got all these numbers on TrackMan. What I still don't know today. What are the key metrics what the golfer should be looking at?
Most of the numbers that come from the TrackMan are indicators of what the end result is, rather than actually, I guess, you'd gauge. We gauge the launch angle and the spin, and obviously ball speed. Those are the key factors.
What is one trying to get those numbers to, say, with?
Well, I guess with the ball speed, on the TrackMan, it's designated as there's a designator smash factor, which is basically it's an efficiency factor, which is a ratio of ball speed to club speed. So for each part of the bag, there's a different ratio that you're trying to work towards, ideally, or benchmark that you're trying to work towards, and that's an indicator of how efficiently someone's striking the ball.
What would be a good smash factor?
So on a 6 iron, we're looking for 1.4, with the driver 1.5. So with the driver, if someone's swinging at 100 miles an hour, you want to get 150 on ball speed. And 80 miles an hour on a 6 iron, and then you wanted to get 112 miles an hour on the ball speed. So now obviously action, how someone's swinging will affect that number as well. But if basically within reason, we're trying to get those numbers as high as possible. And if the flight, sorry,
if like Tiger Woods, what would his smash factor be on, say, those both numbers?
Well, with the driver, you're not going to get more than 1.5, or you shouldn't get more than 1.5 to 1.53, because that would probably make the driver head illegal. So we'd hope it wouldn't go above that. They managed to. We'd have said sort of 1.52, but the way that they're now using some of the technology, they're getting a little bit more sort of a mile an hour more speed out of it. With an iron, probably the most efficient pro that I've seen and that we've tested with was 1.46 with a 6 iron, without using a sort of springy face. There are some of the iron heads that will get a little bit more than that based on the face technology, but from a sort of solid forged head, the most efficient tour plays would be 145, 146.
Okay, so after you fit them, the club making process, how long does that take?
So from once we've gone through the fitting, gone through all the recommendations, and then effectively provided quotation, if someone wants to go ahead, then it's approximately up to 3 weeks to get product in and built. So we would order components from each of the head, shaft, grip manufacturers, get those all in, and then everything's built on site in our workshop here. So we don't send anything off to, if we order anything from the factory to send in. If we are ordering something with stock components, which just because it's a stock shaft doesn't necessarily mean it's not going to work well, and then we would still either order them in component form, which a few of the manufacturers allow, or we would order them effectively uncut and disassemble and reassemble to spec. So we're working to tolerances that are far, far tighter than the factories would, because of the nature of the build that we've got to do. They're making tens of thousands of units a day, whereas we're making tens of units a day. So it allows us to be that much more accurate and build very, very specifically to spec. So that's then all carried out on site, and then we'd contact someone to either will send product out to someone if they're traveling from distance, or ideally come in and collect them and do a double check test on things like lie angles and a base data check, just to make sure everything's doing what it should do when they come and collect.
Cool. And James in the back. So he builds the clubs at Precision Golf. What sort of the gear does he use?
Yeah, James and Nuno do the building here. I mean, they've got various measurement tools, so digital swing weight scales. They've got various sort of clamps and saws and files and grinding wheels. And so, for example, on wedges with the grinding we've got 3 or 4 different grinding wheels, depending on how roughly, how aggressively we need to grind something down, slightly different shape grinding wheels to fine tune wedge head shapes. We've got 2 or 3 other sanding belts for steel and graphite shafts for preparing them for installation. We use the SST Pure shaft technology, which is it's proprietary technology, which effectively is like the best analogy would be like balancing a car wheel. Shafts are made in, again, tens of thousands of units a day, and they have tolerances in both straightness, which is mainly the issue with steel, and construction. So we use a technology that allows us to install the shaft in its most stable orientation into the club head. So we use that technology as well. And then we use an epoxy, which was originally developed for Formula One, which has a fairly quick curing time, but also from a bond point of view is exceptionally stable. I think in 8 or 9 years of using it, we can count on one hand the amount of failures that it has, which is exceptionally good for any kind of epoxy. So we try and use the best pieces that we can to do the job. So yeah, he's got quite a raft of kit in the workshop.
I guess the golf market is ever ripe for the new technology coming in. I know you came back from Florida on the PGA show. Has your equipment on your end on testing grown over the years? I know TrackMan's come out with like Golf Padding Lab and all this. So
yeah, it's always developing. I think the launch monitors are all developing their software, developing their interface. Putting in, say, TrackMan with the putting application, which will hopefully be sort of out imminently. They're developing the measurement tools, from we're now using digital loft lie scales alongside the manual ones as well, that we're always used to use. The interchangeable technology on the heads has made a massive difference to really sort of, from a fitting point of view, to really someone testing exactly what they're going to get, rather than having to make any assumptions. I think that's probably, from a fitting point of view, that's probably the most important bit, is there are very, very few assumptions of any shape or form that we have to make anymore. Where you go back 10 years, there were an awful lot of assumptions we had to make, just based on the fact we couldn't test everything we wanted to together, which now is pretty much, we now have that within reason where we are now. So certainly that side, I think probably the launch monitor side of things and how accurate they are now, that's really improved the testing. Okay.
There's one club in the bag which I've never got really fitted for is the putter. I always it's very much a feel thing. I think I probably have had a putter fitting session in the past, but I sort of stayed away from it just simply because it's a very much a feel club, and I don't want to get too technical with it. Is it a club you should get fitted for?
Arguably, absolutely. In the same way as the rest of the bag, you want to make sure that that one in particular, if you get, for example, head style wrong, loft and lie wrong, again, the roll isn't going to be as good as it could be. You absolutely is something you could and should get looked at. I think the only thing with the putter is so much of it is confidence based and feel based, and it's a slightly kind of grey area, I would say, in the bag, in that it's such a personal element. If you take the Scotty Cameron Tour Rep fits by eye, there's no machines used whatsoever. But then there are now getting more and more data capture tools, the Quintac setup, the Sandfart Lab. Quintac's what Dr. Paul Hurry uses. So it's a putting sort of form of high-speed cameras to look at the roll, the path, the rotation. So if you want to go down that route, there's a huge amount of data that you can get on your putting stroke. But equally speaking, there are an awful lot of players who just want to putt. They don't want all that stuff in their head with the putter. So depending on which way you are, from a sort of outlook on the putter, if you're technical, then there are guys out there are systems out there that give you every number you could ever want to know and more. And if you're not, then you can certainly do it a different way. But
what would that way look? I guess get fitted and just almost forget about it, or
in terms of the feel side of things.
Well, I guess if someone isn't sort of very technical in terms of their putting, I guess the point you're trying to make is still maybe get sort of looked and fitted for one, but don't concern yourself too much on the number side, or.
I think so. I think if you're, it's you to go to see someone about the putter and to say to them, I don't want too much data on this. I think if the fitter knows where you're coming from, then you can tailor it that way. But even just those things like making sure putter length, lie, and loft are right. The balance of the putter from a field point of view. There are things you can look at without having to focus too heavily on the numbers, which are going to help your putting stroke and help consistency. If the putter, for example, is too long, it's going to be way outside your eye line. You're then looking down one line and trying to align the putter up down another. Just something as simple as that can make a very big difference. So it's certainly worth looking at as to how much data you go into. I think that's then up to almost the player to say, right, I want to go down that route, or I don't want to go down that route. But so the putting side, it's so confidence based that you have to be very sensitive to the way the player approaches it, because you can just throw too much at it.
Yeah, I guess that's the balance with club fitting in general. I know, like Bernard Langer, I think at one point used to just go into the pro shop wherever the tournament would be that week, have a feel with the putters that were available on offer, and just take one of those out. And then on the controversy of that. I remember Westwood, I think one of his low point was walking down at the fairway with 6 drivers in his bag, 3 different sets of irons and 6 different putters. And I know that I remember the first times I came in to see you, Colin Montgomery was giving us jip, and he went through a phase like that, didn't he, of almost getting too focused on the numbers.
I think any of the pros can get too. I mean, once you're living, they can. The problem is you're looking for that one key that's going to turn your game around, and so inevitably, from a pro's point of view, they can get quite. They can often get over fixated sometimes on certain aspects of it rather than actually just going out and playing.
Is that what kind of what are they looking for?
The same thing everyone else is. That ultimately just that the numbers are just slightly tighter dispersed than higher handicaps would be. Some players, you mentioned Colin Collins, incredibly feel oriented, and you just believe how sensitive his hands are to balance point, grip size. But these guys are doing it day in, day out. It's their living, and they're going to notice the slightest change on a setup of a club. But I guess they're probably more specific in what they want to feel out the club, or what they want to see from a ball flight point of view. And then it's the challenge is trying to sort of match the best of everything. Whereas actually most amateurs will just say, well, if it's better, it's better. Great, I'll just use it. Whereas it's such a confidence-based thing with the pros that they want to feel a certain response from the club, and they have a certain trust in the way certain things feel as well. So you have to factor that side in a lot as well.
As a sort of master club fitter yourself, you can tell us the real deal about drivers and the never-ending marketing that comes out another 10 yards, 20 yards further, and we all get suckered into it. They always seem better, they always feel better, or the look, or whatever it is. What do we do as the consumers? Do we keep buying into this, or?
I think the answer, they are improving. Every model technically is improving. I think where we are now is there is not that incremental improvement that used to be. So if you go back 15, 20 years, over the course of that time period, up until very recently, you would find that every improvement you would see a noticeable improvement, because going right back, from persimmon wood and wood heads to metal wood, and then the initial small metal wood size to a mid-size, and the mid-size to the kind of sizes we get now. You could buy a better driver every single time, and you would see a definite improvement in forgiveness or ball speed or spin profile and therefore distance. I think where within the rules of the game that are set now, they are still improving some of the things that are being done with the latest heads. Really are technologically very, very interesting and very impressive. How much difference can it make? Well, they're having to slow the middle of faces down to stop them getting illegal. So because they're improving the whole performance across the face, if they didn't slow the middle down, then we'd all be playing with illegal golf clubs. So are they better? Yes. Are they now, without getting the spec absolutely spot on, are they now, can you go out and bar a driver and gain 10 yards? Potentially, but it depends how well your current club's set up. So I'm playing at the moment I'm gaming the original, the first generation RBZ driver. Now that out the middle is as long, give or take 3 to 5 yards of all the current heads. It's just off centre hits. I probably stand to gain a little bit out of it, but I've got to do a reasonable bit more testing myself to convince myself that I need to change. So whilst there are benefits, they are pretty small now. They are incredibly well made, but they are, because you can't now increase the ball speed out the middle of the face. Ultimately, if there's no more ball speed, how do you get the ball going further? Which ultimately, from a driver point of view, is sort of the biggest key to what people regard as how you make it better. So it is going to be very interesting over the next few years to see what's done from a technology and a development point of view, because you look at it from a physics point of view with the club head and really what's doable.
What's more important, club head or shaft?
Both. I think from a ball flight point of view, certainly when you're going looking at the woods, then the club head for sure, because loft and head style and weight positioning affects the launch and the spin, certainly more than the shaft does. From a timing and a consistency point of view, absolutely hands down to shaft. So there isn't really a most important aspect to that. I think from a forgiveness and a flight standpoint, you'd say the head. From a timing and a strike consistency point of view and control point of view, you'd say the shaft.
Shafts, they range radically in price. What makes say like a $20 shaft, even I think some shafts go into thousands. Is that if I'm wrong? But what?
There are some that go a lot more than that.
What's the most expensive one out there?
Well, the most expensive one, there's a company called Seven Dreamers that do custom shaft. They will custom make a shaft for you, and those can get up to $10,000-$12,000 a shaft.
Okay, so what makes an expensive shaft expensive? Because I guess the raw materials of something like that is next to nothing.
Well, actually, that's actually the bit that makes a difference. So the raw materials do vary quite a bit. So what makes a $10 shaft a $10 shaft is there's a lot of resin and some low quality graphite in there. And then what makes in sort of the normal scheme of things, you'd be looking at ranging up to sort of 350 pounds at the top end on shafts without going to the extremes. The grade of material is far, far higher. They might be using different materials differently. They might use some titanium, tungsten, boron, different grades of materials. They're wrapping them differently. So, but ultimately, the quality of the material, that's the big differentiator on cost.
What's your view on it? Do those things matter?
Well, ultimately, it's just what works best for you. And technically a pretty low grade, rotten $10 shaft can outperform a £350 shaft if it just suits you better. So ultimately, the best shaft for someone is only the one that works best, not necessarily the dearest. You're going to get more consistency shaft to shaft from the production point of view of the higher grade shafts because there are less variables within the materials. But it doesn't stop it performing just because it's cheap.
Okay, let's. I want to be respectful of your time. There's the best sort of new or best sort of club company to work with, or best? It could be best new manufacturer in the business. Is there any sort of company that comes to mind, or one in particular that you really rave about?
I wouldn't say there's one best one to work with. I think now, from a fitting point of view, they all understand the necessity for fitting and how important it is. So actually, that's something that has leveled off massively over the last 5 or 6 years. They certainly, going back historically, there were companies that you could argue bought into it earlier than others, but now they're all pretty good. I think from a is one company doing more than others? I mean, you'd have, of any of the sort of the mainstream brands, you'd have to look at PXG and see that they are trying to do things differently. They are very dear relative to others, but they are, from an engineering point of view, doing slightly different things with their club heads. And then looking at what, for example, Callaway have done with the Epic, with the pins behind the face, and what structure they're doing with the head. You're now seeing more and more, you could argue, experimentation, more technological differentiation. Whether it makes a big difference or not to a player, I guess, is another matter. But actually, to be fair to all of the brands, they are pushing it more than they ever have, because they've got to get the incremental gains. So is one better or technologically better than the others? It's a hard one to answer, because who knows what's going on behind the scenes. That, if I give one answer now and say, X is doing something that no one else has done, we'll probably find out in 6 months' time 2 or 3 others have taken their idea and pushed it on a little bit further. So, so tough. And there isn't really a best one. They're all going to produce at times really good products. It just depends on which in the cycles of who's at the top of the tree at the time.
PXG is Parsons Extreme Golf for anyone of those who don't know, and is a fairly new brand on the market.
Yeah, they've been around, just come out for a couple of years now. Bob Parsons, who used to own GoDaddy, he was a massively keen golfer and just wanted to do things differently, and wanted to do the best made products they could. And so took some of the top engineers from one of the other brands, hired them and basically gave them free rein. So rather than having cost constraints, rather than trying to hit price points for the market, they just said, right, go and make the best clubs you can. So it's allowed them, it's given them the free rein and the ability to say, right, just go and do whatever it takes. Now, let's say with how good all the other products are, there aren't, so for example, they're not going to hit a club further than any other brand, but there are certainly performance aspects and feel aspects that they've welded together, which are very impressive.
And what do they do for perhaps people who maybe want to know a bit more about PXG? Is they put this little plastic insert injection mold? Was it or the first people to do that?
It's thermoplastic elastomer, TPE. So within the cavity within the head, there's they put an elastomer in, which, whilst it helps affect the sound, it also supports the face, so it allows them to push that a little thinner. I'm sure other brands will, they're doing similar kind of things. They're all pushing that side of the envelope, but there's a little, they're taking that a little bit further potentially than some of the other brands have at this point. But they'll probably be trying pretty hard to do similar things right now. So just taking the engineering elements and saying, right, how far can we push it? But obviously that comes at a price point. So they are. Yarns are over £300 a club, and the driver that's coming out at the back end of this coming month, back end of April, you're going to be looking up near £1,000 for the driver. So they are certainly dearer as a result.
Nice. Okay, well, I'll just do a couple of rapid fire questions now. What sort of handicap range would get the most out of a club fitting?
Arguably the higher handicap range. So arguably sort of 15 handicap plus, because the lower handicaps will get closer to what they need based on being confident enough to say, that's not me. Most higher handicaps blame themselves. So actually, you normally make a biggest difference for a higher handicap.
Okay. Best iron set ever made?
Ooh, are we talking game improvement or players iron? There's no one best one.
We'll say like a proper player set where you just think, well, that's beautiful. It could just personal.
I think from a design point of view, I think Mizuno's Tezoid Pro was a great head. I think that it's been pretty much copied a few times since. But it
which one was the Tezoid? Is that it's got a somewhat of a catered back, is that right?
Yeah, it's got a sort of a muscle bar. It's got a slight cavity to it, but it had a muscle bar in the middle. And that one, there were 2 or 3 other companies that made very similar products afterwards, which kept the solid contact behind the ball, but gave a bit of cavity. And I think that was one of the first ones that did that. And so for me, that head, I think, was, from a player's point of view, effectively tried to give the best of both worlds.
Yeah, I would. Mizuno TP11s. Don't think you would beat them. Beautiful.
Classic.
Best driver ever made, in your opinion? And it got, this could go way back. It doesn't have to be modern, or.
You'd have to look at. I think to a point, you'd have to look at what Callaway did when it went into metalwoods. They revolutionised the driver. TaylorMade then took the mantle on the 500. The 510 TP, 540, 580 XD. That was a great head. It was a great set of heads. But you'd probably, if you'd say what made some of the biggest differences, I think what Callaway did early days with the metalwood heads was seriously sort of helped to shape where they went from there.
Was that not Big Bertha range, or that was after a little later?
Various models of Big Bertha, then the Great Big Bertha, and it's the biggest Big Bertha, which is about now that looks about the size of a 3-wood head. But I think that during that period, what Callaway were doing with driver heads was very, very impressive.
Best wedges. I know you've got a personal story of going over to Japan, was it, to visit Miura?
Yeah, we. So my own personal opinion would be to say I think that the Miura wedges in particular, just head quality.
Those people who don't know Miura, who are they? What they do?
Miura, they're a Japanese forging house. They've actually made an awful lot of iron heads for major winners over the years, but they don't pay anyone to play their clubs, so you don't see the name out there. But from a forging point of view, the quality of the materials are second to none, and just consistency of spin and distance control. We've almost always found anyone who plays them then goes back to playing another branded head goes back to them because they find the distance controls not quite as good. James and I went out to Japan in 2007 and met Miura-san and his sons, and sort of contributed to one of the grinds that's being used now. But really just fascinating to see the process. But yeah, from a head quality point of view, I personally would have to say those. I
first was introduced to Miura about 10 years ago, and I think the guy who explained it to me was like, if you took a glass or a pint glass of and just poured marbles into it, that would be sort of the makeup of most clubs. But if you took a pint of and then filled with sand, he said that would be the sort of makeup of a Miura. It's just more compact. And I personally, if you had a 7-iron, your distance was 155, or you could never hit it. You can never max out. You would never get the flyer that went 175, for example. It'd always be there or thereabouts.
And so it's down to, if you're going into the sort of the sand and the marble analogy, it's that is spot on. If you go down to the sort of molecular level of the heads, it's carbon deposits and size of, and the smaller and the more consistent they are through the head, the more consistent the performance and the feel and the feedback off of it as well. So you don't get what sort of historically would be described as hot spots on the head. The better the quality of the forging, the better quality of the material, the more consistent the result.
What is the best sort of $100 or $100 or pounds someone can spend money on and in their game, and it would be sort of a good investment? Or
lessons? Ultimately, technique. Good technique is absolutely the most important thing. You cannot substitute that for anything. So actually spending money on lessons, whilst technically I'm doing myself out of saying, buy a new driver, but actually from a long-term point of view and from enjoyment of your game, if you get your technique right, then that will take you through forever. So that would definitely be the best use of any money.
Is that just being consistent on your sort of lessons and not getting into the bad habits?
Or getting out of a bad habit. I think it's if you're saying, right, if I was going to spend £100, where should you spend it best? But if you could go and buy a club, but it might not improve your game. Whereas actually, if you spend money on lessons with someone who's looking at a long-term solution for you, then you can't, in principle, you can't help but improve. And then it also then lasts as long as you keep working on it and keep practicing it over time, and keep the old bad habits at bay. Then that's going to stand you in best stead moving forwards.
Missed this one. Best putter.
Oh, and best. Well, you'd have to say the Ping Hansa, just for what it did at the time, and how every single brand and putter out has copied it since. Obviously, we're not quite good. Obviously, altered it slightly from a legal point of view. It's not a copy, but basically, you used that platform and said, right, that it's just a great design.
I didn't put this one down, but I find grips actually quite interesting now. There was a guy I worked with who he was sponsored by Gripmaster Grips.
Yeah,
and how there's a whole sort of new wave of the quality of grips coming in. Is even grips can go up to the Gripmaster Grips as sort of these handmade Australian leather grips, and they can sort of go to $30-40 a grip.
Yeah, 40-45 pounds a grip. Yeah, with the more, I think around that for the more exotic leathers. Yeah.
So just stick to Golf Pride, your standard sort of multi-compound. Again, is it personal preference or just a decent grip will do? Or how important is that?
It's important because it's your only contact with the club, so it's got to be comfortable and it's got to fit your hands well. So most important thing is size and matching to your hands, as well as being comfortable. So I have a relatively dry skin on my hands, so anything too coarse absolutely tears my hands apart. Whereas someone who has a sort of a more sort of damp skin texture is going to likely go for something with more tread, a little bit of cord potentially to keep the grip good. So it is very important. It's rare to get a bad grip out there now. But like anything, everything's improving over time. But there is now a huge amount of variety. So you can generally 99% of the time match the way getting a good feel for someone with the right size. So yeah, that's definitely an important part.
But individual again. Because I remember picking up, is it Black Widow or the spider one?
Yeah, Black Widow, yeah. Mm.
I remember picking up one. I could barely pick it up. It was so slimy. But, to someone else, it may be, it could be perfect.
Yeah, again, it is exactly that. And so I remember trying everyone when I was playing amateur golf. The top players all use a cord grip, whereas I put someone and my hands nearly bled after a practice session. So it's very individual. We've all got different skin types, all got different. The way our hands are going to grip the club and the grip of our hands are different. So to what's the best grip to one person could be the worst for someone else.
And that pretty much seems like an overall theme of this. All of this is very individual to you, and I guess it's trying to find what works for you. And it could be anything. It's just not because I see someone on TV playing this, I want to play that. It's really, you got to listen to, what your preferences are, and try and build everything around that.
Yeah, as I say, we're all physiologically built differently. We all have different ways of feeling shots. Some players are more visual, some are more sort of touch oriented. What makes each golfer kind of what makes the game enjoyable for each player is different, and so then the way we swing is different every time. So you player to player, that is. So it really is a case of everyone who comes through the door here, where it's a complete blank canvas and you start from scratch. There's never any you play off X handicap, so let's look at that club head for you, or that shaft for you. It just doesn't work that way.
If money was not an object and it was just whatever, just go and you've got to try brand X, brand Y, what would you suggest? If they've never perhaps even heard of them, or it could be like a Miu or.
I think if you look at from I think two point of views, if you to say for someone who's from an iron point of view, ball striking point of view, who's very strong, then the Miura heads, any of the sort of Japanese high grade Japanese heads, there's a Swiss brand called Gmar as well, but the Miuras from a field point of view are something you should certainly have a look at. That's definitely worth. They're probably going to feel the most balanced club heads you've ever hit. From a forgiving point of view, I say PXGs are worth trying, but they come at a heavy price point. But it's a hard one to say. I think there's so much out there now that there's unlikely to be something that, for example, the Strixon Ironheads are very good. Their products are great, and a lot of people might not even realise that they make golf clubs and just see the ball out there. So I would just say, try different things. I think there's not necessarily one brand, one product I'd say, you must go and try that, because it might not work for you. But I think being able to test things out and see different options and try different options, that's important to make sure if you are looking at changing the equipment, you get the right thing.
Yeah. Favourite book? Could be gifted, the most gifted one, or the one it doesn't have to be around golf, it could be around something else.
My favourite book is a bit of a sentimental one. James and I played at Bay Hill a few years back and met Mr. Palmer, and James got a signed copy of his autobiography for me for my birthday the following year. So that would be my favourite book.
Is that just is it got a title, or is it just Arnold Palmer's biography?
Just his biography. Yeah, he just got it signed and sent over for me. So yeah, no, that's pretty special.
Okay, so I know you may have like an action challenge, or we ask each guest at the end of the show a personal action challenge which they can try and maybe use some of what you do on a day-to-day basis and implement to take away home and try themselves. Fire away.
I would say the one thing, whether it, particularly wedges, but work out your yardages. Whether it's if you've got a coach or a pro who's got a launch monitor, get on that and work out carry distances for every club in the bag, because that's the one thing most golfers really don't know is exactly how far they hit the ball. So that would be the one thing I would say: chart your yardages. Get a more accurate idea of how far you hit each club, and once you do that, you'll absolutely improve your scoring. There's a reason why Monty was the best out there. It's just he hit it pin high more often than anyone else. So that would be the challenge. And
that's fantastic. And is they why not the landing point opposed to where it finishes?
Well, because if it's your carry distance, then it doesn't matter what time of year it is, for one. But also, if you've got a bunker short of a green, if you know your total yardage, that's all fine. But do you know whether that club's going to carry the bunker?
Oh, so actually focus on the carry point.
The carry point, yeah, particularly with approach shot clubs. And so with the driver, very few players know how far they carry a driver. So there might be a bunker out there at 215, 220. If you hit it 230 yards, it's unlikely you're carrying that bunker. So again, being able to structure and strategize around the course, that will improve how you play and how you look at the golf hole and your clubbing absolutely straight away.
And would they just record this maybe on a 6x4 note card? Or I know some tour guys have it on their shafts. What would you recommend?
Yeah, we've got clients who've got some dyno or sticky strips with their distances on their shafts for difference of length of swings with the wedges as well, or have it on a card, whichever you prefer. Say over time you won't need it because you'll remember it, but it's probably you're having some kind of documentation, whether you have it in your pocket and look at it before each shot, or have it stuck on the shaft, whichever you prefer, but definitely have it written down somewhere.
Wonderful. Okay, well, I think this has been absolutely fantastic. There's many gems again being distilled from this conversation. Is where can people find you or hear a little bit more about Precision Golf?
So we've got our website, which is www.precisiongolf.co.uk. That's our main site. There is a blog site that we have used in the past for some info, which is customfitting.co.uk. We've got a Twitter feed, an Instagram feed as well, and a Facebook page. So we've got several platforms out there.
Is that all under Precision Golf?
That'll all be under Precision Golf, yeah, or it's accessible off the website. But we're currently putting a new website in place, so that'll change pretty soon as well, and we'll have more videos and content on there too. So those would be the main places.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much again for this conversation. I know we are very much in due for a game of golf with one another, and
yes.
Hopefully catch you soon. And I know you've got the Halford Hewitt coming up this week, and wish you the best of luck for that.
Thank you very much. And you.
Yeah, we may see each other in some round of it, but
Because Sunday afternoon would be good, but I fear we may not last that long.
No, I have a feeling the same thing. Maybe just watching the Masters at home, I think, which should be pretty good.
My wife would be very glad.
Yes. Well, thank you so much again, Simon. This has been fantastic, and hope all continues to go well with Precision Golf. And thanks again.
Great. Thanks a lot, Chris.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And thanks again for listening to Making a Club Champion podcast. If you love the show, don't forget to leave a review. If you want to take immediate action on what you just learned, head over to www.makingaclubchampion.com, where you'll receive your own personal action challenges from the latest guests, all of the show notes, strategic philosophies, and much, much more. If you want even more from the show, head over to Instagram at Making a Club Champion, where you'll receive lots of golden nuggets and gems and goodies. Until next time, thanks for listening.